Can we talk about your contact with Julian through his childhood? It was part of the story, I think.
It isn't part of the story.
Yeah.
The story is that, I'm attempting in my own modest way to get Julian out of the ship.
Julian Assange is the hero of our time.
He was the darling of the left.
All of a sudden, he's a puppet of Russia.
My name is John Shipton. I'm Julian Assange's father.
WikiLeaks found that Julian Assange has been arrested.
One of the most notorious and controversial figures in custody.
Assange will remain behind bars until that extradition hearing, which has been set down for the end of February.
I urge the Department of Justice to drop the charges.
The maximum jail sentence of 175 years.
Because he published the truth.
How does it feel to be the father of such a controversial figure, somebody who's known around the world?
Was that him on the phone before?
Yeah.
What are you talking about on a kind of regular basis?
If Julian is extradited to the United States to face these charges, he will be the first, but not the last.
What are your worst fears?
That it just collapses under the strain.
It looks as though what journalists do for a living is seen to be a criminal act.
Shipton, keep it up, man.
Thank you.
I wish I had your energy, I really do.
I'm done. I'm done. I mean, I'm fucking worn out.
Why do you think there's not a great public love and support?
This is really, truly a good question.
What's at stake? If he goes down, so will journalism.
But if people walked away from this film understanding you, how would you feel about that?
We're here, and this has only come about because we have a child in the ship, and we want to get him out.
Evening again, ladies and gentlemen. I very much hope you enjoyed that. I'm not always sure that's exactly the right word for the experience. It's quite a gut-wrenching thing. Having done this several times now in several different cities, there are always a few red eyes when the light comes up. It's quite an emotional experience, and I think it's always good for us to remember that we're here now watching this, but at this moment, think of Julian in his maximum security prison and what's happening with him. It's always a great privilege to travel and with John, and normally we also have Gabriel, John's son, Julian's brother, with us as well. Because of the rail strikes, we're split into two teams. So there's a different team in Manchester, and you have a smaller panel here today. I just add that I particularly wanted to do this filming because I come from Norfolk. I'm probably the most famous leader of the Scottish independence movement who comes from Sheringham. So it's great to be back. I might slip back into Norfolk as the evening goes on. I think we'll go straight into questions and see how it develops from there. If you can keep your speak out, boldly. Keep your questions relatively short, and if you could try and phrase it as a question rather than a comment, that would be helpful. And also, I have terrible eyesight, so wave in a spectacular fashion as though you're drowning in order to get my attention. Who do we have first? Yes, gentleman back.
Can I ask John
where to start. So the circumstances right now are that Julian has made an application to the High Court to have a hearing appeal against the decisions of Judge Baritza last year. That decision will be coming in a few weeks, up to 6-7 weeks, and they will either decide that Julian can have a hearing against the decisions of Baritza or not. If not, it goes to the European Court of Human Rights, assuming that the United Kingdom will be still part of the European Council and still have the possibility of human rights rather than a fake Bill of Rights, which is the intention of the Tory government. Yeah. I suppose I should, just sort of round out a couple of things. In the appeal against Judge Baritza's decision, Judge Baritza agreed with all of the United States substantive issues. A couple of those to illustrate the quality of that law decision is that the United Kingdom extradition treaty between the United States and the United Kingdom specifically forbids extradition for political purposes, political offences, which of course espionage accusation is. The other one is even more interesting. 9 FBI officers went to Iceland under what they call a derogatory permission and used that in a sleight of hand to promise a man named Thor Darson freedom from prosecution, immunity from prosecution, if he gave witness against Julian for computer intrusion. Okay, that's the first element. The United States FBI promises that Thor Darson will be free, immune from prosecution in Iceland. So there's no judicial responsibility there at all, that you can't allocate it. Then the United States takes that and makes a charge against Julian, which is heard, as Julian is an Australian citizen, for an offence supposedly about to be committed in Iceland, takes that to the United Kingdom Extradition Court for a hearing to extradite Julian to the United States for that. It's absurd. Consequently, the judge accepts that, so it's completely unacceptable. I add another thing. You have to come to an extradition hearing with clean hands. And the United States had the CIA spying on Julian, organised a spy ring on Julian, all his communications, every cameras in every room, conferences with lawyers, conferences with doctors, and stole all of Julian's legal papers at the end of Julian, when you saw Julian dragged out of that embassy. They just stole them. So that means that they come to a hearing with what the lawyers call in bad faith. And as a consequence of that, the case is immediately dismissed. So that's 3 elements where this case had best have been immediately dismissed. I add another comment. So there's about $1 trillion in contracts issued in London each year for loans of one sort or another. They often come into dispute, and that dispute has to be adjudicated in the courts of law in London. Having a reputation for non-partisan judicial decisions is vital for the ongoing ongoing quality and stature of the loan procedures and law courts in London. Really important. So that's been brought into question now. Every loan manager will take out or be forced to take out extra insurance for any loan that's written in London as a consequence of understanding that if the United States wants to, it can push a decision either this way or that.
Who else do we have who'd like to contribute? Yeah.
I've just got a curious question. How the hell do you cope? I mean, day to day, what keeps your strength going? I mean, it's obviously, you can say, well, obviously the end in view is to get Julian out, but how do you physically cope or emotionally cope day to day? It must be very difficult.
Well, yeah. It's a really good question. I mean, when you're in front of, we've had full houses. This is the 23rd, we've got a couple to go, or maybe it's the 24th, forgive me if I forget. And we've done 20 of these in Australia. But sitting here with you guys, it's lifts the spirits. I mean, there are people who are concerned. That is an energy. If I could expand on that a little bit. Every single parliament in the European theatre has an Assange cross-party group. The latest to join last fortnight was Luxembourg. Even Luxembourg. There's 23 in the United Kingdom Parliament. There's 90 in the Greek Parliament. There's 90 parliamentarians in the Bundestag signed a petition last fortnight. The petition committee accepted that, and which means that that particular petition has to go as an agenda item on the United States and German Friendship Group. In the French Parliament, it became it's a matter of pride and honour to the French because Julian and WikiLeaks revealed the spying on their president. The president of France can't ring up and say, oh, can you bring home a bottle of milk without the United States overhearing and recording it. So they debated in Parliament whether to give Julian an asylum in France. So I'll add a little bit more. The president of Mexico, Obrador, made two statements, very firm, that Julian ought to be freed and given asylum and offered asylum in Mexico. Not only that, he trolled the Americans, which is a hoot. He said that if Julian's extradited to the United States, pack up the Statue of Liberty. You people don't deserve it. Send it back to France. I mean, a very delight to troll the Americans. And every South American parliament, without exception, has Assange support groups of one sort or another, not necessarily cross-party. It's just a habit of Europe to make a cross-party group. The Australian Parliament had 31 before the last election, started off 4 years ago with 2, and now had 31, and after the election has 50 odd, and the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has said, this has gone on, enough's enough, and we can't see the purpose in this. So that, just trying to give you an idea of your power. It extends right around the world. That's the power of us. In every single parliament, we manifest ourselves. And you're here today is another manifestation of the concern and power of the people that support Julian Assange and urge the government to do the right thing.
I'd add to that, but there's a real feeling this last couple of years that the tide is turning in public opinion here in in the UK, having fought against false narratives for years and years and years. I'm now much more hopeful, and we enjoy it much more. And it really does help your spirits up, keep your spirits up. I'd also add that Lagavulin helps. The old malt whiskey helps keep us going, and we've just had a wonderful couple of days here in Norwich, and just talking to ordinary people, the amount of support that you get from ordinary people in the street when they realise who you are and what you're doing is very heartwarming indeed. Who else do we have?
Did you get any support from the local media or press at all?
No, strangely enough, we haven't been besieged by the EDP. No. I'm afraid it's been. It's one of the interesting things about the entire campaign, which is that although most major mainstream media houses have now come round to supporting Julian as an editorial position because they realise the impact that the persecution of Julian, the prosecution of Julian could have on them, the implications for freedom of the press if anybody anywhere in the world can be extradited to the United States for publishing facts about the United States or secrets of the United States, despite never having been in the United States while doing it. That kind of extraterritorial jurisdiction is a real threat to press freedom everywhere. But still, even though on an editorial level they realise increasingly the threat that the United States action poses, there's still no warmth, and coverage is still very grudging. But one thing which has become increasingly obvious is that most people no longer get their news from the mainstream media or the legacy media. People more and more get their news online from many different perspectives. And the growing alliance, if you like, of independent media outlets and independent websites and bloggers really is a real threat, I think, to the future of the established media model. So I'm not quite certain how long the EDP will continue to exist.
There's a couple of things. They are blighters, these people. Julian, you often heard executives come out. What I mean by executive is a member of the government, a minister or something. Executives of state come out and say, oh, he's free to leave, he can leave any time he likes. But the truth of the matter is that the Crown Prosecuting Service and the Swedish Prosecuting Authority conspired with each other. Now, I just don't make that up. That's in there, actually, the Swedish Prosecuting Authority conspired with the Crown Prosecuting Service to keep Julian in jail. When this pressure on the Swedish Prosecuting Authority became intense, they released the email correspondence between the Crown Prosecuting Service and themselves, which demonstrated, and I quote from the emails, "You're not getting cold feet on this, are you? There's more to this extradition process than meets the eye," stuff like that. So they conspired to keep Julian in the embassy while the executive officers of state said he can leave any time. These people are absurd. There's a couple more things I can add to that. Julian fought 3 court cases in Sweden, eventually ending up in their federal court, which is the same as your High Court. To get the Swedish prosecuting authority to pursue the case, to advance the case. That's 3 times that and eventually the federal court ordered the Swedish prosecuting authority to advance the case. They took an interview and then dropped it. There were 4 prosecutors in that case. The first prosecutor, Eva Fine, said that there was no case to answer. No laws have been broken here. Full stop, that's what she said. So, also I had, just this is a bit of gossip, but helpful. I had a lunch in 2011 with an ex-police commissioner from a substantial European state who said to me, you know, well, he said a funny thing. He said, you can trust me, you can tell me anything. And immediately I thought, I can't trust you a bit. But he also revealed that 4 Secret Service agencies were following Julian. Immediately he got off the plane into Stockholm back in 2010.
John, I wanted to thank you for your generosity with the film. I think it's clear, and I think the film portrays very well a desire to silence Julian, and the film, I feel, is speaking truth to power. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just one comment on this. Craig Murray maybe retell it a bit better than me, but Craig rang up on behalf of Julian a couple of days before that incident where they dragged Julian out of the embassy and said that Julian was quite willing to walk out of the embassy and surrender himself to the police. Immediately hearing that, they brought on this farce, this demonstration of state power, this it seems like vindictive, malicious frustration to drag Julian out and throw him in a van. He's been kept incommunicado. The reason why you never hear anything from Julian is he's not allowed to speak. It's just not allowed, incommunicado. In the court case itself, Julian stood up once and addressed the judge on a matter that concerned him, and the judge immediately said, "You are well represented here. If you speak again, I'll have you taken to the cells and the case will continue without you." It's just endless. It's just that this. I was in Scotland with Craig, it must be over a year ago, and we went to this journalist who did an interview, and with that wonderful diction that Scots have there, they can say a couple of words and it'll make your ears bleed. He came up to me and said, "John, you've got to write a book, and I've got the name of it for you. A Deluge of Malice."
Someone over here had some.
Yes, please forgive my limitations. English is my first language. I was wondering, just a short while ago, Craig, we mentioned there being some form of optimism maybe because of a shift in narrative. I'm wondering, Mr. Shipton, if you agree with that changing narrative, and if your stay in the US also had maybe influenced and colored that picture for you.
I didn't hear. I heard the last part, but
whether or not you feel as optimistic about a changing narrative within society as Craig seems to be, because in the documentary you seem to be, well, not as hopeful perhaps as Craig was just suggesting he is about the outcome of the trial in general.
no, you know, there's 2 things that are really interesting in that. The upwelling of support for Julian worldwide, including America, where we did that 15-city tour, is unstoppable. It's a rising tide. Nothing will stop it. Yeah. That much is clear. But when I said in the film that it can only get worse. All you've got, in my reckoning, when you come into this place is a bit of time. And these blighters conspire to steal that. They steal your time. And so that's over a year ago. And they've stolen another year of his life. He's now 51. His little children are this big, and they sort of need their dad. They stole everything from him. Everything, his reputation, his freedom, his time in life, time with his children, time with his wife. There's nothing that they left untouched, these blighters. And so as a consequence of that, intuitively, right round the world, a rising tide, I mean, it gets up your nose to see a human being so treated. And I'll give you a heartening example. When they released those cables, there's 250,000 cables. Every one of those cables can bring benefit to somebody somewhere in the Western world. One of them, one in particular, this is one example out of 250,000. There are many examples. Maybe I'll give you two, one's amusing. Is that the Chagos Islanders were dispossessed of the Chagos Islanders by the United Kingdom government, and all the people were dumped in Mauritius and their dogs were shot. One of the islands was given to the United States as a base called Diego Garcia, where they have B-52 bombers land. B-52 bombers are nuclear bombers, and they threaten you and everybody else in Europe, keep you in line. The Chagos Islanders and their lawyers took the United Kingdom to the International Court of Justice, and based on those cables, they prevailed. The decision came in their favour, and so it goes. The next one is a little bit amusing. When Rafael Correa won government, he read the cables concerning Ecuador. One of the cables describes how the elite police force of Ecuador were paid their wages by the United States Embassy. And then, in other words, they're loyal to the embassy. They're not loyal to their government. So, faced with this problem, Korea came up with the most elegant answer based on the cables. He paid all of the police force the same wages as the elite police force. And so it was able to run a stable government in his state.
I'd just add to that, one thing I've become, having sat through all of Julian's trial and hearings, one thing I am absolutely personally convinced of is that judicial independence is a sham. The judges aren't really independent at all, and that it's the security services who are calling the shots throughout the judicial processes. I think that's true. That's certainly true here, and I think it's also true as to what was happening in the United States as well, in driving us from the Justice Department. That we have this illusion of democracy and this illusion of an independent judiciary, but when it comes to matters they consider to be of state security, it's the security services who really are telling the judges what to do, and I'm personally entirely convinced that's what's happening in this case. It was all on this side.
Can I ask about the attitude of the Australian government? I mean, what are they doing to help you and assistance?
Anthony, the Prime Minister's given me his phone number, and we had lunch a couple of times. And interestingly, there's, say, the Greens have doubled their parliamentary representation. A new party called the Teals, 7 members were elected. All of those people were elected on an Assange platform. The Prime Minister and most of the candidates mentioned support for Julian Assange. I take that as an indication, a political indication. They understand what's rising up, the rising tide. They understand that. But politically, whether they've got the wherewithal to be able to do anything about it, whether they've got, what do you call it, the cajones to go and confront the United States is another matter. So I remember, and this is how we act, you know, that with the New Deal proposition came before Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He said, I support this policy. I like this policy. Now make me do it. And that's our attitude. You know, it doesn't stop at the vote. It continues in these meetings like this, and again and again and again and again. So there's, on the 28th, there's a whole mob of, in Australia we use the word mob, you know, it's a group, a mob of people going to Parliament in August, when we leave here on the 30th, and on the 2nd of August we go to Parliament, a group of us, and we see one parliamentarian after the other. So the understanding is that you build a power group greater than the power group that exists against you. That's the understanding. You know, we don't play. We used to play before we became a little more sophisticated in understanding, but we build an association of friends and supporters right around the world who have more power and more understanding, a deeper reflection, and in the case of Australia, propose clearly that the stature of Australia is reduced. The other day, somebody speaking to me asked me about Australia, and I said, well, Australia doesn't exist. It's not a place. It demonstrates no sovereignty. So we all, in supporting Assange, we do two things. First of all, we return to Australia the stature of sovereignty, so it can negotiate in world forums its own position from a stature of sovereignty. And primarily, of course, we get Julian to come home to his kids. I hope that's a proper answer. Oh, there's a hand.
Do we have any more hands?
Yeah, I had a question that's sort of mentioned in the film. This is how this has impacted the mainstream media. In your opinion, how deep is the reverberations of what's happened to Julian hit the mainstream media, the way you see it now?
Can we share that answer to that? You know, as I say in the film, look, legacy media requires licenses. Okay, it requires the submitting of tax returns. It requires people to join unions and associations, all of which can be influenced by government. It requires bandwidth because they're all online. You have to license your bandwidth. So the government has immense power over legacy media. Each month, the editors, sorry, not the editors, not necessarily, a representative from the major newspapers meets in the Department of Defence with one of the, you know, they have a meeting, I forget the people involved, maybe Craig will remember. Each month they have a meeting. A D-notice is a restriction on publication, and you can't announce that you have such a restriction on your publication. So the government has tremendous power over legacy media, but it doesn't have that over declassified. It doesn't have that over dissenter. It doesn't have that over Craig Murray's column. It doesn't have that over UK column. It doesn't have that over Tony Gosling, many of them. The alternative media here in the United Kingdom is an example to the world. It's lively. It is yeastful, you know. Yeah. So that's to answer your question. The worldwide uprising of support, which I reckon is unstoppable, comes about despite legacy media, not in spite of it. And at the last, the blighters have realised what it means to them, that their prestige is gone, their power has evaporated, and if they utter anything that their government doesn't like, they'll be arraigned and have to fight like Julian for 13 years for his freedom, despite the fact that the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, which the United Kingdom is an author of and a signatory to, declares that Julian Assange is arbitrarily detained, ought to be freed and paid compensation. Another one, the United Nations Rapporteur on Torture, which the United Kingdom is an author of and a signatory to, sees Julian in the embassy mid-2019 with two experts, doctors who evaluate the results of psychological torture and declare that Julian has been psychologically tortured through mobbing, smearing, calumnies, unscrupulous lies over a period of 7.5 years. And it's ignored, even though the United Kingdom is a signatory, an author of the structure of rapporteur. It does them no good. No good can come out of this. It just needs abandoning. I shouldn't leave it up in the air like that. It's too painful. You know, I got in a taxi in, I like Glasgow. I mean, the city itself is a bit ruined, you know. There's nobody spent any money forever, and all the money goes to, well, you know where. And I got in the taxi and I had to sit in the front because everybody else was in the back. And so I said, making conversation, I said, do you like the works of William McIlvaney? Because he's a crime writer specialised in Glasgow. Oh, too many consonants.
I think we'll take one more from the audience.
A question really for both John and Craig. We've heard a lot about the growing support for Julian around the world. And then in this country, and Craig spoke about the people he spoke to in Norwich and the support he garnered from them. Have you got any indication of the numbers of people who are going to be turning up to the Houses of Parliament in October to form this human chain? Because that's absolutely important. I mean, I signed up, you see, it was just a web. I got an email and signed up. I just wondered if you had any feedback about the number of people.
No, I don't. And, you know, I don't. There's an odd thing about human beings, you know. We get together, like in this circumstance, and we create within each other ideas and a bonding. And so, and it's a bit, if you take the imagery of throwing a pebble in a pond and you see the ripples spread out, the ripples aren't the water moving, okay? It's not us moving from place to place. The ripples are the energy that the stone falling in the pond created, and they move out and they blend, because this, we've done 27, I mean, I must have done 300 of these, and it is spreading in the examples. There's even 9 members of parliament in Norway in a cross-party group and so on. So that indicates a growing energy. So I don't, measure it on how many people are turning up. I measure it on the phenomenon of the tip of the iceberg is the parliamentarian, and what holds him up are us. We the people.
If I can wrap things up now, and I'd just like to cast our minds back to how it all started with WikiLeaks and what WikiLeaks was for and what it did. And for many of us, it had a profound effect upon our entire lives when the United States, the United Kingdom and others launched a major war in Iraq on the basis of lies, on the basis of calculated untruth about weapons of mass destruction and about the alleged threat Iraq posed to the rest of the world. And Julian stated that all major wars have been started on the basis of lies. The populations always lied into war, and the purpose of WikiLeaks was to enable people to see the truth about what government does, the truth about what government knows that it doesn't want its people to know. And that was the entire basis of the WikiLeaks philosophy. And it brought about this revolutionary change in giving people access directly to the raw material of history, not mediated by some media organisation that could decide what you could see or what you couldn't see, but the actual documentary evidence of what government was doing. And it revolutionised public perception across the globe, and people realised that there's a great deal of lying and deception in government, and a great deal of government secrecy is not there for genuine reasons, but is there to protect very sectoral interests. And we shouldn't lose sight of that. We shouldn't lose sight of the nobility, if you like, of the WikiLeaks mission in empowering people, and the nobility of what Julian wanted to do, and the revolution in public perception which Julian has led. So we're not just fighting for an individual who has suffered a great injustice, though we are fighting for the individual who has suffered a great injustice. We're also working for the freedom of somebody who has a historic place in the history of journalism, a historic place in the history of popular empowerment, and who still has a very great deal to contribute to the world and to contribute to people, and a great deal to do in leading us further into the movement of popular freedom. So let me finish on that note, and thank you all very much indeed for coming.
I just add one thing. I've got to boost this book. It's the it's the trial of Julian Assange. It's for sale out there. If you get a copy, if you can. We charge £5 above the retail price. It keeps this caravan rolling. So,
if you don't buy the books, we won't be able to get our tickets to Newcastle tomorrow.
Thank you.
So one question that I really want to know is, what is your opinion on the lack of mainstream coverage on the Julian Assange case?
Very, very disappointing. It seems as though that the newspapers sort of ganged up and smeared Julian in obedience to the dictates of the United States government and the United Kingdom government. Now, lately, all of their editorials support Julian and insist that Julian not be extradited. It's too little, too late, in my view.
And how do you feel about what I saw in the videos, that the mainstream journalists seem happy that when Julian was arrested? How do you feel about that?
Well, that arrest was filmed by a young woman from Rupley. She was the only journalist there at the time. I've met her a couple of times and she remained a strong supporter. However, the United Kingdom mainstream were not the slightest bit interested. They did become interested lately. Principally because they realise that they will be the next ones in line if they transgress against the government's guidelines.
And what message or piece of advice would you give to journalists that are starting out, or younger journalists?
Oh gee, go alternative. Don't try and crack the mainstream media. Those institutions are passé, and the life of journalism and the life of comment and the life of analysis rests with alternative journalism and alternative media. In the United Kingdom, it's very, very vibrant, I've found.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.